The tents mysteriously appeared one night, catching our small town by surprise. No one, not even the mayor, had a clue they were coming. It caused quite a stir at City Hall, but somehow they must have struck a deal because the Gypsy Circus remained. In our little town, even a modest fair was a big deal. And that's how I found myself there one evening with my older brother Tenny and his rowdy friends. I was just 15 at the time, and even though our town was far from Boston, my mother's strict upbringing meant I couldn't roam freely. She wouldn't have allowed it, but she had no idea how troublesome Tenny and his gang could be. If she knew, she'd probably prefer I was on my own. Jarrett, the biggest and most annoying of the older boys, poked me and asked how much cash you got. I really disliked him. He would constantly pick on me, punch me, and make fun of me, while my own brother chuckled along. Jarrett was twice my size, and though I was considered a runt back then, I dreamt of the day I could stand up to him in all of them. I handed him the $20 Mom had given me, but I didn't mention the extra $5 I'd hidden in the bill of my hat. That money was my secret stash, earmarked for a sweet candy apple. In our house, treats like that were a rare indulgence thanks to my dad being a dentist. When we entered the carnival, Tenny and his friends disappeared, leaving me on my own. It was my first time at a circus, and while there weren't many rides, enormous tents dominated the scene. Barkers urged everyone to come and witness the magnificent wild animals or the astonishing oddities of nature. I chuckled at that thought, considering I had ridden in with a bunch of misfits. However, I was determined to see a lion up close. They had always looked so regal on TV. So, albeit reluctantly, I parted with $2 and entered the lion tent. The tent had a distinct aroma of sawdust, sweat, and animal dung, but inside I encountered the most incredible creatures I had ever laid my eyes on. I picked up a peanut from the ground and fed it to an elephant before finding a seat on a bench to await the show. The lions were the highlight for me. I knew they were large, but I never expected them to be that enormous. I held my breath as the lion tamer fearlessly stuck his head into one of the beast's mouths. Their incisors seemed as long as my fingers, and their back teeth, which I had learned from a book my dad gave me, were called carnassals, worked like scissors to cut and tear meat. There was no way I'd ever muster the courage to stick my head in there. After the show, I contemplated spending another $2 to watch it again, but my longing for a sweet apple won over. As I headed towards the food trailers, a girl called out to me, "Want your fortune told for just $1?" When I saw her, I was utterly captivated. Her face would remain etched in my dreams for the rest of my life. I wish she could have seen her own fate that night instead of mine. What happened to her was undeserved. I couldn't take my eyes off her. Her eyes were different, one icy blue and the other brown, just like mine. I wondered if she wore special contacts to create this striking effect. It was even more mesmerizing because she was beautiful with her long black hair, full lips, and a genie-like outfit that left her smooth, tan belly exposed. My teenage hormones took over, and I followed her into her tent. She took my hand and held it out in front of her. She spoke for a while, offering vague predictions. Then she gazed into my eyes and said, "You should stand up for yourself. Don't let others control your destiny." I often thought about that later, wondering if she truly saw something. It turned out to be good advice. I wish I had taken it. After my reading, she walked me out, her hand resting on my arm. Suddenly, Jarrett's booming voice interrupted. "Well, what's going on here? The little fella's got himself a girlfriend." She clutched my arm a bit tighter and then she smiled. "I'm taking a break." Jarrett caught her arm as she tried to pass, while Tenny and his friend James blocked her way. I wanted to tell them to leave her alone, but my voice felt like a frog stuck in my throat. "Hold on," Jarrett said with a leering grin. "I've got $1. I want my fortune told." In fact, he added, looking at her suggestively, "What can I get for a 10? I was horrified when he grabbed her and pulled her close to him. She struggled, speaking in a foreign language, and spat on his shoe. In response, Jarrett backhanded her and forcefully dragged her into the tent. I tried to flee, but James tripped me and I fell into the dust. my mouth filling with blood. James yanked me to my feet, and I heard a click as he opened the switchblade he always carried. He pressed it against my back. "One wrong move, and I'll hurt you real bad," he threatened. "We don't like snitches." It felt like an eternity, though it only lasted a few minutes. They treated that girl horribly. I heard her initial struggle, and then there was nothing. The silence was terrifying, and I was crying with blood and snot choking me. People walked by, oblivious to the terrible things happening right in front of them. The newspaper later reported that her father found her in the tent, battered and unclothed. It took her 2 days before she could provide a description to the police. I felt relieved when the police arrived at our house. "Don't you dare say a word," Tenny hissed at me. "I promise, if you do, I'll make sure you regret it." I wish I could say that I spoke up and told the police everything, but I didn't. I believed her description and the DNA evidence would be enough. But I underestimated the politics in our small town. Jarrett, Tenny, and James concocted a story about the girl being involved in prostitution, claiming she'd asked them for money and threatened to accuse them of a crime if they didn't pay up. They alleged that another gypsy had beaten her to make it all seem real. In the end, the judge closed the case and let them go free. We left the scene together, and I felt a sickness inside me, a profound shame. Tenny and his friends stood beside me, dressed in their neat suits and ties, looking almost innocent. An elderly gypsy woman approached us, muttering something before making a strange gesture in the air with her gnarled finger. Jarrett moved toward her, but James held him back. The girl sobbed against her father, her once beautiful face still swollen and discolored. She whispered something to the old woman and pointed at me. The old woman's eyes narrowed, and she made another sign. "That's enough," my father said, leading us away. The circus vanished, and within a week, my brother and his friends met tragic ends. Tenny got his hand caught in a restaurant's garbage disposal while working after school. As it chewed his arm, he screamed about the lion's teeth. He bled out before the ambulance arrived. James had a fall from a ladder while helping his father repair their roof. The fall severed his spinal cord. Jarrett endured the most horrific fate of all. He had a car accident near Johnson's Bend and his car burst into flames. Rescuers mentioned that his screams were something they'd never forget. I imagined him still screaming and burning in the place he ended up. I dreamt about the old woman every night, hearing her words, "Your crime is silence. You stood quietly and allowed evil to prevail, thus sealing your fate." One morning, my tongue felt strange. When I looked in the mirror, it appeared as if a piece of bark was attached to it, and it felt like bark too. Mom was still in her room, so I didn't disturb her. Somehow, I knew it was my time. I ventured into the woods behind our house. With each step, my feet grew heavier and I could barely move through the leaves. Looking down, my legs no longer resembled human legs. They were transforming into tree trunks with roots curling from my toes and anchoring into the ground. When I raised my hand to touch my tongue, my arm froze in place. Bark rapidly covered it, like building blocks connecting, transforming what was once human. Without surprise, I saw the girl emerge from the woods,